A big story this week from the Southwest, where thousands of RVers head for the winter to boondock on land operated by the U.S. Bureau of Land Management near Quartzsite and Yuma, Arizona. These large long-term visitor areas, or LTVAs, currently require a $180 permit for the winter. But the Bureau of Land Management is proposing an increase up to $600 per vehicle and are seeking input from the public, which I'm sure they're getting. I'm Jason Epperson, and this is RV Miles. Welcome back to RV Miles, everybody. This is normally when we be doing our weekly news roundup on Mondays, but we just have one story to cover for you this week, and it's kind of a big one. And I also want to give a pardon our dust and a behind the scenes look a little bit. This is our Mile Zero studio. You've seen me coming from here for the last several months, but what you've seen is sort of our office area, and we're building a big set for our news roundups and for our podcast, and that's all what's going to be behind me back here. But more importantly, let's get to the news. People have been boondocking in these BLM long-term visitor areas in southern Arizona and California for a very long time. And the use of these lands by RVers has been increasing, though perhaps not quite as much as you'd expect. People throw out numbers like 1.5 million RVers visit Quartzsite each year. And while that might be true, there aren't millions of RVs camping in the desert. That's 1.5 million people, first of all, not RVs. And that's how many people come through the area. They don't even need to stay the night. It's a visitor statistic, just like when they report that 50 million people visit Chicago each year. Well, there are only 2.5 million people that live in Chicago and 45,000 hotel rooms. You do the math. They're not all coming at the same time. Still, Quartzsite and Yuma and areas in Southern California, these are places where RVers do come and stay for months. Here in Southern Texas and Florida are about the only places in the country where you can stay through the winter without need for too much heat. Head up just the road to Northern Arizona and it could cost you $200 a month or more to heat an RV with propane. Full-time RVers and snowbirds go to these areas and have for decades because they're affordable places to spend the winter. Have you priced campgrounds in Southern Florida lately? Now, some people will call out millionaire RV owners and their $400,000 motorhomes paying pennies a night to stay in these areas, and there's certainly an element of that. But the vast majority of these folks are senior citizens, lots of people on fixed incomes, lots of people who have homes in the far north that they can't afford to heat in the winter. So you can look at this as well-off people who can afford luxury items like RVs, playing camp in the desert and enjoying our communal public lands for a few months and not paying their fair share for it. Or you can look at it as some of our most needy people traveling to some of the most inhospitable land in the country to be able to afford to live for the winter. The reality is there's a spectrum, and those are the far ends of it. Most people fall in the middle, but perhaps weighted a bit towards the fixed income side of things. But the thing about places like Quartzsite is that as opposed to a lot of the places where some of our most needy people live in RVs on city streets that are barely held together, the LTVAs operate fairly problem-free. Most people are there by choice, and they're a community. There are lots of volunteers to clean the pit toilets and manage the water stations. There's a big RV show every year in Quartzsite. There's lots of organized group camps and more. Nobody is permanently camped because you're not allowed to, and it's incredibly hot in the summer. The long-term visitor areas were created in 1983 to provide limited resources to the people that camp there and protect the land from overuse. Part of that overuse was just RVs moving around every 14 days when they reached the stay limit that's still pretty standard for BLM boondocking outside of the LTVAs. It was silly to have people move every 2 weeks, causing more impact to the land when they move, when everybody is just swapping locations for months at a time anyway. Now, when I say limited resources, I mean very limited. There's crude water fill, a handful of pit toilets, and a few dump stations. The La Posa LTVA in Quartzsite has 10 pit toilets, 8 water faucets, a dry dump station, another dump station with water, and trash services for visitors staying on 11,400 acres, which is about 18 square miles. For $180, you get access to stay on that land and access to the dump station, water, although I hear the water's pretty bad and you're better off paying for the filtered stuff in town, trash service, etc. From September 15th to April 15th, you can stay up to a total of 7 months. If you don't want to stay the whole winter, you can pay $40 for any 14-day period from September 15th to April 15th. You can get a $75 permit to stay the warmer months from mid-April through September, or pay $15 a night, though it's hot. The average high is 95 degrees in May, and it gets worse from there. But a lot of people do stay in these LTVAs in the winter. It's not millions. Billions, it's a lot. Last year, the Yuma Field Office, which manages both the La Posa LTVA near Quartzsite and the Imperial Dam LTVA near Yuma, sold 9,192 LTVA RV permits, which they believe represents between 22,000 and 32,000 visitors. Most of those permits are the $180 ones, but some are the monthly ones. They don't have an exact count of people, but they estimated via on-the-ground surveys that the average number of people per permit is between 2.5 and 3.5. Now, that's not to say that these are the only people that visit Quartzsite and Yuma in the winter. There are actual campgrounds in these areas, and there are other boondocking areas that are free, but do have that 14-day stay limit. So, what's this proposal all about? Well, I'll get into the details in a second. But first, this episode is sponsored by the folks at RV Life. The RV lifestyle is about community, and the RV community is at the heart of RV Life. RV Life recently celebrated the 1 millionth trip planned with RV Life Trip Wizard, their excellent trip planning tool for RVers, featuring all the trusted reviews, pictures, and tips from their RV Life campground site. RV Life also features several blog sites and over 20 additional RVing forums to serve the RV community. All this experience and community feedback come together to help create a fantastic RV trip planner and mobile navigation tool collectively called RV Life Pro. RV Life has marked a milestone of over 3 billion miles traveled using RV Life Pro, counting both the planned RV trips and ad hoc navigation with the included RV Safe mobile app. Take 25% off RV Life Pro at the link in the description for this episode. So there's been a lot of disinformation spread around about this, and I'm not an expert on staying in these areas. I want to make that clear. But let's go through the specifics of this plan so people have the correct information. The fee to stay in an LTVA has not increased since 2008. About 7,000 permits were sold that year, and with just over 9,000 sold in 2024, there's been a 30% increase in visitation in 16 years. The Bureau of Land Management says 100% of those fees return to the LTVA, and what's more, there's a shortfall. Permit revenue in 2024 was $849,400, but staffing expenses alone were over $1.1 million. That includes 2/3 of the salaries for 12 full-time employees, mostly rangers and law enforcement, and $126,000 for the volunteer program. The volunteers are paid a stipend. Overall, BLM says they operate the LTVAs at a 37% to 40% shortfall. The water and dump stations have apparently been expanded upon for this upcoming season, and beyond covering the budget shortfall, the BLM hopes to provide a few more amenities in the future while upgrading what's already there. Things like replacing the water tanks from the 1980s at a cost of about $1 million. A business plan, their word, not mine, was officially released on Friday, but a lot of people knew it was coming. It proposes to increase current fees from $180 to $600 per long-term permit, and from $40 to $200 per short-term permit. So really big increases. It would also modify the short-term permit length from 14 days to 30. So the short-term permit going up from 40 to 200 is mitigated a bit by it being a 30-day permit instead of a 14-day one. The plan is specifically for the Imperial Dam and La Posa long-term visitor areas managed by the Yuma Field Office. I know we're getting deep into the weeds in this here, but stay with me. It only applies to the Yuma Field Office managed LTVA locations. The plan says starting September 1st of 2025, the permits for Imperial Dam and La Posa would be valid only for those locations and would not apply to the California LTVAs and vice versa. The California areas don't seem to currently have a rate increase proposal, but perhaps one will be coming soon. So That's a big change. Currently, it's one permit. You can bounce around to all of these, and a lot of people do. The proposal specifically calls out the California areas being separate, even though the Imperial Dam site is technically in California, right near Yuma, Arizona. But I think the language is just muddy. It seems this proposal is particularly for Imperial Dam and La Posa in Yuma and Quartzsite, because those are the ones managed by the Yuma Field Office. So increases to $600 for the 7-month, $200 for the new 30-day, and no more ability to use the same permit at the other 4 LTVAs and vice versa. BLM also wants to put in a mechanism for fee increases in the future, tying it to the Consumer Price Index. Every time the CPI rises 20%, a 20% increase in LTVA fees would be triggered. The proposal says, quote, due to the shortage of funding, necessary maintenance, contract adjustments, and staffing levels have been kept intentionally low and deferred to maintain fiscal responsibility. It is anticipated that the recreation fees will increase available funding for site maintenance and improvements. If approved, the plan as proposed would allow for the changes needed to effectively manage the LTVA program for future generations. It goes on to say, impacts, if the plan is not approved, include potential adjustments to the LTVAs to manage visitor numbers and amenities and services within the existing budget. So perhaps quotas on the number of people who can stay and cuts to the already limited services. I think most people would say that $180 for trash, water, dump stations, a bit of law enforcement, and maintenance over 7 months is pretty fair, if not cheap. And perhaps an increase in fees wouldn't be that big of a deal to most if it were something like $50 or even $100 over the course of the year. But $420, it's a big jump. So where did they come up with that number? Well, here's where government gets a little governmenty. The plan says that the BLM did some market research and identified that locations within the Southwest region charge anywhere from $15 to $25 per night for fee-charged dry camping, and some even require reservations, often having to be made months in advance. They looked at state parks and casinos and some state-run visitor areas in the area, some National Park Service-run areas in the area. I think that's a huge whiff of the bat there. Hardly anyone is paying $15 to $25 a night to boondock long-term anywhere, maybe for a few nights, but there are still places where you can get full hookup campgrounds for a monthly rate that beats $15 to $25 a night, which shakes out to $450 to $750 a month. Are they going to be nice and in nice places? No, but neither are these LTVAs. So, do you think it's BLM's plan to just discourage people from visiting these areas? Well, not according to the proposal. They're counting on the money. They expect to triple their revenue to over $3 million per year and are basing it on selling the same number of permits per year. I think it's wild that you'd imagine increasing the price of something more than threefold and not have a reduction in sales. And remember, there's still lots of completely free boondocking in Arizona and California. It just all comes with a 14-day limit. So really, they should be comparing it to that, not Harvest Host overnights, not no hookup state parks or wherever else they're getting this $15 to $25 a night boondocking average from. Especially because if the price gets too high for LTVAs, most people who use them are just going to camp back on the free 14-day lands and move around every 14 days, negating the entire purpose of the LTVAs in the first place. Part of the justification for the fee increase in the proposal uses the number of total visitors the Yuma Field Office counts for all the lands it manages, which is far more than the LTVAs. The Yuma Field Office manages 1.2 million acres. That's an area of 100 times the size of the La Posa LTVA. The Yuma Field Office said it saw 894,000 visitors last year, which is actually trending down. They had 1.3 million in 2021 and 1 million in 2022. Regardless, only 2 to 3% of those visitors are people staying in LTVAs, according to their own numbers. So why are we using this as a justification to increase the cost for people buying these permits? It doesn't make any sense. This isn't the first time major increases have been proposed at LTVAs, or at least rumored, and I do think there will be an increase. Will it be this large? Well, I think in the end, they'll probably do something more reasonable. This could be a shock tactic to get people to be comfortable with $300 or something. But that's all speculation just based on proposals I've seen like this in the past on public lands around the country. So it is just a proposal and is subject to change. And the Bureau of Land Management is looking for feedback. Public meetings and information sessions will be held in the coming days, virtually and in person. I'll link to that info in the description. Comments may be submitted by mail, hand delivery, or email. I'll provide that info as well. A 45-day comment period has begun and will run through October 21st, 2024. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Do you regularly stay in LTVAs? Have you been interested in it? Would this fee increase be too much for you? Or do you think it's reasonable? If you like what we do here, consider supporting us by becoming a mile marker member. It's $7 a month or $70 a year, and you get some extra benefits like additional podcasts from Abby and I, and a digital subscription to RV Today magazine and more. We hope to see you there. It really helps out, and this content is really supported by the folks that are mile marker members. We're having our homecoming event coming up this October in Amana, Iowa, October 9th. We hope to see you there. It's going to be a great weekend of lots of fun and hanging out and cornhole tournaments and trivia and a lot more. All the information is in the description. Hit the like button if you got something out of this video. Subscribe if you want more like it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.